Come on, we're at least a little bit excited, right? Like this much? Good afternoon to you. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is the new Double Shot Show. It comes your way usually at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on weekdays. Today, we pushed it back for what I'd hope would be obvious reasons. The NFL trade deadline hit at exactly 4. We wanted to make sure that the Steelers were done for the day, and they are. 2 moves. Mike Williams, wide receiver from the Jets, acquired for a 5th-round pick. Preston Smith, edge rusher from the Packers, acquired for a 7th. And the end. No big names, no giving up multiple picks, high picks, or anything like that. You have an extra wide receiver. You have an extra edge rusher. That's really, in all likelihood, how that'll play out. They bolstered a couple of areas in which they felt, and rightly so, that they lacked appropriate depth. End of analysis? Well, maybe not. Maybe not. See, I've been making the case for, I was going to say weeks, for months now, that this team is potentially worth investing in. Meaning looking at the dynamics of who you have, what ages they are, meaning TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, guys like that aren't going to be able to perform like this forever. And then saying, okay, let's look at the rest of the league, see how the league is doing. Let's see how this team performs. Let's see how it comes together. And then as these months would go by, the weeks would go by, once you're into the season, I don't get how Omar looks at this team and says, that's what this feels like. That's what this feels like. If you're 6-2, and they are, if you've made it through a certain segment of your schedule where you have a chance to kind of recalibrate and go into everything, and which they have in a good spot, and then from there you look around and you see the AFC doesn't look like it's overwhelming to anybody. Did you watch the Chiefs last night? I did. They're 8-0, and yet they squeak out every result. Now, I get it. You can have, a tie game and put Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce out there and pull it out, but that's not the Chiefs that we've seen in the recent past. The Bills aren't some powerhouse either. The Ravens aren't some powerhouse. This is there. And the decision that you make, if you're Omar, more than any other, I believe this, is how much do I value this season versus how much I value draft picks next year or the year after that. And I don't like that. I don't like that. That's not the vibe that I'd gotten from Omar in his first year and a half on the job. I'd gotten the vibe that he says, hey, see that right there? We need that. We want that. And we're going to go get that, whether that's free agency or in any form of acquisition. But to be this careful about it, to say, 5th-round pick, 7th-round pick, I'm willing to give that up. Listen, it's not about what's appropriate value toward the exchange. I want to make that clear. 5th-round pick for Mike Williams is a fair trade. 7th-round pick for Preston Smith at age 31 that's okay too. All I'm saying is that there were guys who you could have had along the way for just going up another couple rounds. Did you see DeAndre Hopkins last night? Think that guy would make a difference? There's any number of wide receivers that you could mention that about. And you can look at this scenario and say, all right, if DK Metcalf was available in Seattle, why did the Steelers not even call the Seahawks, as became known today? Why did they not even pursue this player? Is it going to cost you a ton? Sure. Is it going to be un-Steelers-like to do that? Absolutely. But I just don't get it. I don't get looking at this team and where they are and the opportunity that's in front of them and just saying, nah, not this time. When we come back, you're going to be joined by Chris Halicke.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores, track the latest stats, chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
Joining me now so that we can dig into these two guys a little bit deeper here is Chris Halicke. And Chris, your first thought when you hear the name Mike Williams, just first thing when it popped into your brain there.
I was like, yeah, I kind of saw that coming. Like if I were to take a bet of any receiver the Steelers were going to land today, Mike Williams is probably near the top of the list. I like maybe they could have tried to pry Darius Slayton from the Giants, but
I don't know.
I didn't think the Giants. I was getting the feeling in the days leading up to the deadline that the Giants weren't going to want to part with them.
No, they were looking to rip somebody off. They were looking to see if somebody would grossly overpay. I never took that one seriously.
Yeah, so I thought Mike Williams was probably the most likely candidate, and that's what ended up happening. Obviously, the Preston Smith trade kind of took me by surprise a little bit, even though I guess I wasn't paying close enough attention in Mike Tomlin's press conference today, because he kind of hinted at some edge stuff, and we can get into that here in a little bit. But I thought it was a pretty decent day. But yeah, the Mike Williams stuff, I kind of understand the trepidation from the fan base there.
Williams is the football player.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of him with the lightning bolt on his helmet, and he's flying down the field and making nothing but big plays. That's been his thing. When he makes a play, it's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
That in isolation is exciting. His being on the wrong side of 30, his being coming off a major knee injury last year, having to build himself back up, his being openly assessed by people with the Jets as trying to build back his speed. When you're that type of wide receiver, you don't have even a fraction of a step that you could afford to lose, or you're reinventing yourself. Now, he's also 6'4". He's been one of the better combat catch guys in the league for a while. And I think the Steelers could use some of that in some capacity. But if we're being real here, if you're looking for a place to slot him in to the current core, boy, I hope that neither he nor anybody else would take offense to this. I don't know that I'm putting him out there. You know, if I'm Arthur Smith, I'm not putting him out there over Van Jefferson when I know that Van Jefferson can do my run blocking for me.
I kind of contest what Van Jefferson can do in run blocking. I haven't been impressed with his run blocking whatsoever.
Smith likes him.
I know that. I'm just giving my own opinion, and Arthur Smith may very well disagree with me, and that's fine. He knows more than I do. So I'm just saying, like, I think that they really needed an upgrade. It was far-fetched, but Cooper Kupp would have been a great
They needed a
addition.
possession guy. Just say it. They needed a possession guy. They needed somebody who can move the sticks.
They needed somebody who can move the sticks. They needed somebody who could also help out better in terms of run blocking. The one thing that intrigues me about Mike Williams, the one thing is now they have two guys who can line up on the outside, go down the field, and make contested catches.
That's it.
And when you have one guy, defenses can afford to play one high safety, have that one high safety shade over to that guy's side, and then pretty much just make the other guys like Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin beat you. When you have two guys who are very, very good at making contested catches, both on the outside, that's going to force defenses to have to run more too high stuff. That in turn can open things up on the ground because they can only put 7 in the box now instead of 8. Then you're talking about possibly opening up the middle of the field for Pat Freiermuth, Calvin Austin.
I remember him.
Yeah.
That's going to be my solution to all of this, is that by doing what it is that you're describing here, that the wide receiver 2 that they'll have acquired is Freiermuth. Because now they can actually throw to him or try to throw to him.
And also remember what happened with Calvin Austin in that Chargers game. Remember the Chargers run a lot of middle field open.
Yes.
And Calvin Austin kind of carved them apart with a couple of really big catches over the middle of the field, including the touchdown, obviously. So
from Justin Fields. Yep.
yeah. So and make no mistake, Russell Wilson can also make those type of throws, those really quick slants that you don't have to like try to see over the top of guys or anything like that. But I'm not overly excited about the Mike Williams acquisition. Don't get me wrong, but I think it can have some positive impacts to the rest of the offense.
Now, where Preston Smith is concerned, I don't know how much more obvious it could be that he's basically coming in to fill the role that Marcus Golden was supposed to fill before he only lasted in training camp for a couple of days and called it a career. Golden filled that role really, really well. And for anybody who's forgotten, by the time the Steelers made it into the playoff game in Buffalo, it was Golden who was out there on the field making the plays because TJ was unavailable. This is Preston Smith bringing him in it almost feels like adding too much on top of that. So that has me a little can I just throw this out there? I know Nick Herbig is coming back and he's feeling good and whatever, but it's almost like an abundance of precaution on the Steelers' part. Doesn't it feel like that with the outside linebackers, whether it's because of Herbig or whether it's because you think, what do you do if TJ gets hurt or whatever? There's not anybody else in the fold. Jeremiah Moon had a nice game in Las Vegas, but doesn't it feel like this is just Tomlin saying the one thing I can't handle is not having enough edge rushers?
He talked about that specifically today, which is what I was saying. Like he specifically mentioned, the times in which he's pretty much only had TJ because Alex Highsmith was out with an injury, and then Nick Herbig was out with an injury, and then the attrition has absolutely been there. And so, what's one way to combat that? Well, to just add another guy. And this is a pretty accomplished guy. The dude has 68 and a half career sacks. I mean, and they only gave up a 7th round pick to get him. And
even with the cap space he fit and all that other stuff, 68 and a half, as you mentioned, over 10 years in his career. He had 2.5 this year. He's been kind of an 8 guy for a while, meaning 8 sacks a year. And that's Marcus Golden. That's who he is. These are real live football players. And Tomlin does not live that life where he doesn't have people at that position. He sees that as the fatal flaw. You know what I'm saying? Because that's when he'd have to start blitzing to compensate. That's when he'd have to worry about sealing the edge on runs. And he doesn't want it. He doesn't want to wake up every day thinking, oh no, how do I take care of this? He just wants it to be solved.
I also think that adding Smith, it kind of adds a different weapon because Smith is a bit of a bigger body. He's more like a DeMarvin Leal type, somebody who fits way better he's actually coming from a Packers defense that runs a basic 4-3 defense, and he plays the defense. He was playing defensive end there. And so now he's going to play outside linebacker in a 3-4. Those are a little bit different, especially when you're in your basic defense. So I think the way he's going to play that edge position is also going to be a little bit different. It's going to throw another wrinkle in the way offenses have to defend it. And now when you look at the overall group that they have up front, and I'm talking about the interior defenders and edge rushers, it's pretty freaking good now.
We say that, Chris, and you know what I'm going to come back with. Until these guys are avoiding these 1 or 2 or even 3 series long lapses against the run, I'm not letting them off the hook. And you know who else is not letting them off the hook? Them. Yeah. You hear them they are not close to satisfied with how they've performed. This is it's a depth signing. It's coming from the right place. All I know is that if you're waiting for a splash from the Steelers in general at any position, I do believe that Omar Khan today showed his inner Steelersness, if that makes sense. Okay. He's like, Omar, you guys thought I was going to come in and revolutionize the GM role and be a totally new wave or whatever. I'm not criticizing him. These are both fine acquisitions. Okay. But any idea that Omar was going to come in and say, oh, I'll make everybody forget Kevin Colbert and how things have been done here forever. No, he's a Steeler. Omar's a Steeler.
Yeah. And To his credit, or might even say discredit, he did try to get the bigger guys. But trying only counts in, well, what's the saying? Close only comes in horseshoes and hand grenades. So you come close, but it doesn't happen or whatever. He tried to get Brandon Ayuk. It didn't happen. He tried to get Devontae Adams. It didn't happen. But I think that, to your point, the inner Steelersness, to use your phrase, is he had a certain price that he was willing to pay for those players. Now, from what I know about the Brandon Ayuk situation, that price was good enough for a trade.
Yeah, the Ayuk is almost a different category,
but
because it was so much incumbent on the player himself.
Right. But then you look at everything else, they were only willing to give up a certain amount to get Devontae Adams. I don't think Devontae Adams really wanted to come here. He wanted to go with Aaron Rodgers anyway. He could have probably overpaid and gotten one of those guys. He probably could have slapped the first round pick down on the table for Brandon Ayuk, and the 49ers would have been like, screw this. We don't even need this headache. We'll just take the first round pick. I don't know. We'll never know that. But yeah, I do think this kind of aligns with what you would expect the Steelers to do. It's not necessarily bad. They still have a lot of wiggle room for next year. They can still, sign, if they want to, Russell Wilson for, I'm just throwing a number out there, like a $30 million a year contract, that still have a boatload of cap space to do whatever they want to do with next year. So
the only thing we know, go ahead, Chris.
I was just saying, I think the team is better now. Is it like, are they like all of a sudden a Super Bowl contender? No, but are they better? Are they deeper than they were? Yes, I do believe that. We'll just have to see how things play out.
Well, the only thing I think that we know that we'll see how it's going to play out is that come tomorrow over at the complex, the biggest, broadest, most genuine, most heartfelt smile in the entire facility will be that of one young Calvin Austin III, because he is WR2. When we come back, J1Q.
Safety is a habit. Gun safety and responsible storage are no different. Help prevent gun accidents, misuse, and theft. Keep firearms safe and secure when not in use. For safe storage options, visit projectchildsafe.org.
For today's J1Q, we now go to Dan Snyder down in Tampa.
I'm curious on your thoughts on the moves by the front office just before the trade deadline. Personally, I'm thrilled about the addition of Mike Williams and Preston Smith. While the Steeler Nation is probably definitely excited to see an additional wide receiver in the room, I'd like to hear your perspective on how you think Mike Williams will impact our offense. His name may not have been the big splash everyone was expecting, but I genuinely believe he's going to elevate the wide receiver core and move the needle in the right direction. And as for Preston Smith, I think he's a fantastic asset and addition to our edge rush depth. But I can leave that for another time. But if you think it's worth exploring now, happy to hear your thoughts.
Dan, it's worth exploring in the moment, because all trades are, especially when they're related to a team that's living in the now. And I'm with you in the context that, Chris and I were just talking about, that this team is better right now than they were this morning. How could they not be? If you look at Williams' history, you look at his pedigree, and as Chris was pointing out here, and I thought this was a great thing that he brought up, the specific, very specific skill set that Williams has, being 6'4", being able to high point the ball, being able to win combat catches, dovetails with what we've seen already between Russell Wilson and George Pickens. Remember, even in Russ's first start, when he had nothing else going on, he was throwing all those low balls. He looked rusty as anything, understandably. The one thing he was able to do was just put up these prayer balls for George and tell George, go get it. Well, you can do that now with two guys, and that does force teams to play your wide receivers more honestly. You're now not just looking at George as the deep threat. So, yeah, they're better. Edge rusher, Preston Smith, as we've said already, he's going to be a guy that just he's there as Marcus Golden. There's nothing deeper involved in this. But where the offense is concerned, I think one very important takeaway from today, and I hinted at it at the end of the last segment, is that Cal showed them something. Calvin Austin III showed them something these past couple weeks. It's not just the touchdown. It's certainly not the punt return. It's that he was able to get open and get utilized. And there's a trust that's developed between Russ and Cal that they feel counts for something. My thought is that Cal today became almost etched in as the WR2. Now, if you can pull people away from the middle of the field, you can get Pat Freiermuth more involved, Darnell Washington, then it really doesn't matter who WR2 is because you got a bunch of them. And to be honest, that's the way Arthur Smith likes it anyway. So, again, I was not expecting after hearing of these two moves for everyone to go, woo, yeah. I think the reaction was a lot more appropriate that you just offered. They're better. They're better. And they're out 2 picks from next year, but they're better. I appreciate that, Dan. I appreciate everybody checking out the Double Shot Show, and I especially appreciate your patience while we waited for the deadline to get done. We'll be back with another one of these tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern.